Hello, people, and welcome back to another episode of CamBro Conversations with your host, Colin Campbell. And today, I'm lucky to be joined by Ant Mellor. Ant is a 21-year-old serial entrepreneur and somebody that I've known through the fitness game who has now grown into the manufacturing sector and has a really interesting story to tell us around when the side hustle becomes big enough to go full-time alongside a lot of other business experience as well. Ant, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me on.
Pleasure, Ant. And I guess that kind of top level introduction that I've done will give the listeners a bit of a flavour for who you are. But as with every podcast, it's nice to have a bit more of an in-depth one. So if you want to take the reins and tell us a bit more about your story, Ant.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, without going into too much detail on anything, I started my first company at the age of 18. It was an independent sportswear brand called Absolute Fitness Apparel. Maybe some of the listeners might have heard of it. I hope you have. That meant my marketing was good at the time. So I started that business at the age of 18, and I built that up over the years. Whilst I was running that company, I was working full time. So at the time, I was working at Heathrow Airport as a security officer. So it was very much a side hustle. There was always the plans for it to become a full-time thing and grow from there, but it started out as a side hustle. Whilst I was working within that sector, I was sending, thousands of pounds to countries I've never been to people I've never met. There was kind of a rapport there, but it was very iffy. I wasn't always confident that I would get the product as I'd requested. So I was, wondering there must be a better way of doing things. There must be a way in which I can, one, feel more confident, and two, actually be able to communicate with somebody who, understands me, knows what I'm looking for, and can actually empathize with where I'm at in terms of business. This money is money I've worked very hard for in my full-time role. It's not just a pot of a budget that I've got as a huge company. There's a very, personal side of this. This is something that I want to grow. So anyway, in November of 2018, I launched a second company after seeing a gap in the market, wanting to provide the service that I could get myself. I launched at the time, a sportswear manufacturing agency wholesaler company. So the idea behind this company and the uniqueness of it was that we were going to invest into bringing aesthetic garments that consisted of premium fabric that we would stock and store here in the UK. We could offer a range of customization options on them, so from screen print, direct garment, vinyl, embroidery, and all different garment finishing options to it. The idea behind that was to allow startup brands to have access to low minimum order quantities, to work with somebody based in the UK, have great communication and all of those other things. And then the business kind of grew from there. So since November of 2018, I've been working on the manufacturing side of things, and we've done well, let's put it that way.
Brilliant. And so much for us to cover within that first segment already. And for the listeners that don't remember, when my brother and I were first CamBros, we were wearing AFA when it was starting out, and it was new and exciting. And anyone that's listened to episode 3 with Justin will remember the battles that somebody goes through when they start out in that fitness clothing space, because it is even then it was quite a hectic, challenging market because of the number of entrants. But now it would be even harder, I guess. But yeah, it was an exciting, fresh brand, and I know that was like a big passion for you. But the interesting thing for me was that a year, 18 months into doing that, you'd identified the problems that you had as a business owner, and then started to provide a solution to it for people based on your own experience, which I just love that idea.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things, the generic kind of business, or the generic kind of good business, we'll say, comes from somebody having an issue and then solving it themselves. So many businesses come into the market off of what they perceive to be a problem, other than it actually being a problem. Now, sure, this was based off of my own assumptions, i.e. problems I had, issues I faced, but I knew that this was across the board. This wasn't just me. I was working with manufacturers that their communication was great in the sense that they would reply quickly, but there was no substance in the message. If I asked a question, the question would get answered and wouldn't really answer the question I was asking, in other words. And that, alongside just the constant mess ups, and then not being able to have full confidence in that person, but not having the option to go elsewhere, because it was so difficult to find manufacturers, that you just stuck. You're stuck between somebody who can't really do the work as well as you would like, but at the same time you don't have an option to go elsewhere. So it was something I was very passionate about, ensuring that I could solve for people, which I feel like we've done pretty well up until now, and we'll continue to do so.
Absolutely. And I think like I say, that interesting part is that you, from your own personal experience, you would have known that this was a struggle that many people would go through, particularly as a startup, when trying to find a reliable source to take their product to market or produce their product. And it's that kind of establishing a solution to a common problem, which is the foundation of a lot of really good businesses. And that first year for you was huge, wasn't it? Because you'd had to continue your full-time role alongside Heathrow Airport alongside AFA, but quite quickly White to Label in monetary terms was really successful to allow you to move forward. I think we joked about you having like a £40 investment initially in White to Label to get started.
Yeah. So up until now, I know, because I kind of submitted my business accounts not long ago. The total director's loan account, i.e. the money I've put into that company since launch, is £550, but from day one was 40. So that's all I put in. I put in about another 500 and something pound about 6 or 7 months down the line, just to bankroll a little collection that we'd launched. But yeah, other than that, it was a £40 investment just to get the website, the email set up. I built a website myself. We kind of launched a minimum viable product and went from there.
Brilliant. I think it's just such a good story when you compare that to the numbers that are maybe involved in being a really successful sportswear brand, in terms of really conquering that gym market. You probably put more money into AFA than that over a considerably shorter period. And I think it shows that when you maybe find that right sector or industry for you, the investment maybe doesn't have to be colossal if you've got the right idea and the right service behind it. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always cost-effective ways of doing things. That doesn't mean that it's the best way. For me to have spent $5,000 on getting a professional website and branding kind of guidelines built would have been the better option. However, at the time I was like, it's not needed. I can build a website myself that will do the job, and kind of follow that MVP, minimum viable product process. And in every podcast I do, I talk about this book. I know you talk about Atomic Habits. I talk about The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, because it's such a good book in terms of helping someone who wants to start out, realizing actually the best way to do it is to, if we're talking anything IT based, launch something with bugs, launch it, just get it out there, get some feedback, because all of this secondary marketing consumer research you're doing, it's okay to know the size of the market and it's great in those respects, but it doesn't really tell you how successful your business will be. It's kind of like a vanity metric. So to actually get something out there, have people come on the website and in turn contact you, ask you questions, and from those questions you can kind of tailor it towards, okay, well, if they're asking that, I clearly don't answer that question on the website, I need to add that in. Or, okay, they've asked for that service, actually that would be quite a good idea to include in. Let me look how I can get that, built in, and fine tuning it. And one thing I want to stress is that although this company launched in around November of 2018, we're still to this day doing that. We're still switching up, still changing who we work with. We're still offering new and more unique services day by day. So we're always taking on that feedback and growing from there. It doesn't stop after a certain point.
It's that beauty of the agility you've got as a startup, but also with the mindset and the willingness you've got to embrace change. And I know we'll get on to the impact of COVID later on in the podcast, and you've got some refreshing perspectives on that, which I've enjoyed chatting to you about offline before or on Instagram.
Yeah.
But it's great that you've got the agility to take on board feedback, adjust your offering based on that. And that's the same as any business should really have. But we've laughed before, corporate structures, and in my own workplace, I'm involved in some heavily bureaucratic decisions sometimes to make a change in approach. although in my own role myself, I've got quite a lot of autonomy based on what I need to do in my deliverables. Any corporate structure has so much management to go through, whereas the beauty of a startup and the reason that sometimes they can boom so quickly is because if they spot something, they shift and they just go down that path. But then even when they're going down that path, there could be little segues off to the side to make that kind of adjustment to what the market wants. And ultimately that's what you've done. You've spotted what the market wanted and adjusted. Was there anything else that you particularly learned from AFA and the experiences you had within that you've now taken forward?
So much that it's quite tough to hone in on anything specific, but I think it gave me a lot of experience. Obviously, everything I know in terms of product development, I learned from AFA, going out and sourcing my own suppliers and working from there. So that is obviously the biggest element of what I've learned that I can use in this business now, because our core offering is that product development. But in business terms, I think just making sure, firstly, you've done your research properly. It's not based off of your own assumptions, because that will pay later down the line. And having something unique, like genuinely unique in the market. It's okay to have competitors. You can just do it better than them. And better than them doesn't have to mean beat them in terms of price. It can mean you can offer more, you can offer things quicker, or even, as long as you're justifying why you do what you do to the point where people are still picking up business with you, it's fine. But I think a big thing to note on the other side of that is that you don't need to reinvent the wheel. In order to be unique, you don't need to go and do something that is so out there. You just need to do something a little bit better. That's all it is. White labeling has been apparent in every industry for years. It's not hidden that supplement companies buy unbranded protein powder and whack their label on the top, or skincare companies do it. I just took that concept and I applied it to sportswear and fashion, and built white to label manufacturing. And that's exactly what we've done from day one. It's not reinventing the wheel. It's just offering that service in a different market, knowing that it will it's required.
Yeah, that's so true. You took a concept that was successful in other spaces and just made sure it was applicable to the space that you wanted to thrive in. And from my perspective, thinking from a sales and a business development head on, I can certainly see why other people who want to do what you did with AFA or want to do what you did in a similar space would believe in you, because you've experienced the same challenges, and you can then, from a storytelling perspective, and anyone that's listened to a lot of the podcast so far will know that I'm big on stories, bringing things to life and building people's trust, and that kind of relatability is massive. So they can ask you from your own experiences, why is this the solution that I need? And you can say with confidence that it will save them potentially thousands of pounds. It will save them time, it will save them stress, and it will mean that they can probably, or definitely, deliver to their customers a better product faster, which is ultimately what anyone that's producing clothing should be wanting to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, is that that storytelling is something that I've probably not done great in terms of it being on the site. So without revealing too much, we're going through a whole rebrand and web development right now. So that agency thing I mentioned doing from day one, we're doing now. So that's going to become a lot more apparent. But you're right. A lot of people can appreciate the fact that I've been in their shoes. I know what it's like. There's so much going on in the business. You just want someone else to make sure that they can do the job and that you're confident in that. You don't want to have to worry about, am I going to get my product? Is my product going to turn up and have issues? And look, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like issues don't arise. But the important thing is that when they do arise, we're accountable for them. If there has been a quality control miss on a couple of products out of 500 units, it's not the end of the world. And technically speaking, it's within what we would call, a margin of error sort of thing. So in terms of terms and conditions, we wouldn't actually have to refund them, but we always would. We'd always get a replace sent out, or a refund sorted. It's not something that we're willing to risk our reputation on just for the sake of 2 products or 3 products, or, touch wood, we haven't had any huge issues up until this date, because we're always very kind of concrete with our processes and how we get to the finalized product. But yeah, making sure that person has every confidence in you being able to do that, so they can focus on everything else is probably the biggest thing that people can empathize with. And when I tell them that I've been there, I know what it's like. If anything, that wins a lot of people over. It's more that that emotional selling technique, which is a way in which they can really believe that you know what you're doing because you've been there.
It's such an important role in a transaction when somebody trusts in what you're telling them, and you can do that. And I guess when you're saying that storytelling's not been something that you've maybe maximized quite yet, but it's certainly something that sounds like in the future it can continue to help you with your growth. One of the kind of parts of your story that always interested me since we've connected since 2017 has been that the fact that it was a side hustle alongside quite a grueling shift-based job. And I know that you've told me before why you were doing night shifts, and I'm sure the listeners will find that quite funny as well. But do you want to talk to us a little bit about that role and what it meant in terms of you being able to work on other projects and eventually get to a stage where you could say, I'm all in as a full-time business owner?
Yeah, absolutely. Realistically, that's what a lot of people are going to go through. They're going to start a company alongside running, or alongside a full-time job, or even part-time if you're lucky. But that's the realistic route that a lot of people are going to go. And I think that it's great because one, you've still got bills to pay. You need to ensure that, yourself and your family are looked after. That's the most important thing out of everything. It's great to have an idea. It's great to have a concept, but you need to ensure that you've got your head screwed on, and you don't want to be stressing about how you're going to pay your bills on top of how to build a company. So definitely ensuring that you don't jump the boat too early is the best piece of advice. But I had a shift pattern. So as I mentioned before, and at Heathrow as security, it's a role that mentally is not very draining. It's very kind of repetitive. It's once you get into the emotions, it's quite easy to do. And I always preach that if you're going to start a company as a side hustle, you should have a job that does one of two things. Either one, it teaches you skills that is relevant to what you're doing. That could be sales. That could be, it could be a vast majority of things. It could even be, you're in a corporate company, but you're taking time out of your day and your breaks to go and sit behind the director or the CEO to learn about how they do, what processes they implement, and then apply that yourself on a smaller scale. Or on the contrary to that, as a job that doesn't actually drain you an awful lot mentally. So you can still pay your bills, but you can still be there when you're trying to build your company. So Heathrow was the latter. That was the one that it wasn't mentally draining. And the night shifts were a lot quieter than the day shifts were. So I would deliberately swap into night shifts. Nobody wanted to do them, so that when I was at work, I could take my laptop in, I could do my work, I could read my books. And then I could spend my days booking meetings and getting phone calls and things sorted that needed to be done, like shipping orders and stuff.
Yeah, I laughed so much when you told me that for the first time. I was like, you sneaky bastard.
Yeah, but you have to be smart, and that's the thing. It's, in every job, there'll always be an opportunity to be able to spend more time on whatever it is you need to do. And maximising on that is important. Not to the point where you're skiving off of work. That's not the advice I'm giving.
No.
But in my particular role anyway, and I can obviously only comment on my experience, was that the night shifts were an opportunity for me to spend more time on what I was doing. And it made sense because I was still getting paid by Heathrow. I was still earning a wage. I was still doing my job. Don't get me wrong. It was just a lot quieter, had a lot more free time to focus on what I wanted to do in terms of my side hustle as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And even in my role, where a lot of my end results are related to my output, there's time when maybe I read something online that's related to work that I can then repurpose as an Instagram post for work. So at the moment, lots of the content my company are sharing is supporting businesses with their people risk when they're working from home in terms of mental health and potential claims coming down the line with respect to employers' liability for your employees working at home's welfare. And I read that and I can repurpose some of that for supporting people who individually want to look after themselves from a welfare basis. So there's lots of things that you can learn within your role that you can then put into other projects that you've got and use that time wisely. And like you say, you weren't necessarily, it wasn't like skiving off work, but in those down periods where you weren't on the frontline security or actually involved in the role, you were able to get the laptop out, working some AFA stuff, working some white tail label stuff, you were able to listen to your audiobooks or read your self-development books, which I know you're a massive advocate of. And for the listeners, the one time that Ant and I have actually met in person, we went and trained in Teddington when I was down in London.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I remember jumping in the car, Ant picked me up from the hotel, heading to the gym at like 6 a.m. to get a session in before my meetings. And playing out the car stereo wasn't bangers. It was an audiobook. I can't remember who you had on, but you were always listening. You were always listening to stuff that was furthering your mindset and your approach to business, which at like 18, 19 years old was just such a game changer for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think statistically speaking, I think Audible's told me I've listened to like 20 days worth of audiobooks since I got it, which was only 3 years ago, which is quite a lot, I think. But yeah, absolutely. I think that it's shifting those, and you're going to love this, it's shifting those habits. That's all it is. And there's no defining moment really, or anything that I did that made a huge difference in what I do. It was just a case of building up these small things day in, day out and being consistent with it. And I preach it so much, as consistency is key. It sounds very cliche. It's something that so many people say, but the same principle applies to training, diet and nutrition. It does the business. It's just a different focus. You can't, similar to how you can't build an amazing physique with a week's worth of hard training and then taking a month off. You can't build a business with that same principle either. You need to constantly be on it. And I think when you find something that you really enjoy doing, whether it's business, whether it could be anything, whatever your passion is, you'll find that number one, it doesn't feel like work. And number two, you can't switch off. So you're always thinking about it. And that's where, when I go for walks, it's kind of downtime. But I've still got audiobooks and I'm still using that time to maximize my learning and understanding. And my real downtime, in all honesty, is the gym. But obviously now it's now outside workouts and stuff. But yeah, the gym, I can just listen to music and I can focus on a very simple task, which is lifting up weight and putting it back down for an hour. Is my time to really shine away from all this kind of stuff.
That's really insightful, and I think you're absolutely right. And yeah, you're talking dirty to me with those habit chats, but the main thing there is it was just little small changes that you're making, and that's where the beauty of habits is. It's that kind of 1% per day better. So on your commute to work, rather than listening to music or just scrolling mindlessly, you plug in a podcast that's got stimulating conversation. You listen to an audiobook that maybe, if even it could be fiction if it improves your mood, but it could also be non-fiction and could be a mindset-based one that makes you think better and prepares you better for going to work or going to whatever situation you're going to. And it's those little changes that add up. Like you say, that 20, 30 minutes on the train soon becomes 20, 30 days of listening time if you do that over a number of years. And
absolutely.
And the things that you learn from that they compound over time, and they add up to a position where you're really able to move forward and put yourself in a better position business wise. When did you get to a stage with White Tail Label when you said, I'm going to be full time now, I'm ready to leave Heathrow?
It was about 5 months in, and it's strange because I preach not jumping the gun too early, and I think maybe to an extent I might have, but full transparency, I had another job lined up, hence why I gave my notice at Heathrow. And then I was in my notice period at Heathrow. I was due to, my last day, I think was on maybe a Friday or a Saturday. I think it was a Friday. And I was due to start this next role on a Monday. And I just went, nah. And on the Saturday I called and I was like, look, I'm really sorry. I know I've been through the process, but I'm not coming in on Monday. And I just went, okay, fine. I'm just going to chance it. I've spent since 18 years old building up my business. I know that it needs my time. We'll figure it out. And I know that I'd enough attention and enough traction from White Tail Label, be it only 5 months in. Just to give an example, the 4th month into business, I'd done more revenue and profit in that 1 month than I did in 2.5 years of AFA. Yeah. Just for an idea. And that was just 4 months in. So I was at the point where I was like, okay, look, I don't want to preach, okay, last month might have been a good month, this month might not be so good, but I know I've got the traction, So that was where I was. I was about 6 months in and I decided to jump ship.
Yeah, I remember your LinkedIn post related to that, and you were happy enough to disclose that 2.5 years of AFA, you'd worked really hard, but there was an element of banging your head against a brick wall sometimes when it comes to really exploding upwards. And the listeners, like I said, will remember when Justin on episode 3 was talking about Shore Fitness, the investment to really boom in that space and then to turn it into big enough to be a full-time job is incredibly high.
Yeah, it's an overhead business. You know, you need to have so many units of stock in order to grow. So it's tough. It's a tough industry to be in.
But then compare that to the fact that in a month or in that short period, you've found a niche where you're like, wow, I can add value here, but not just value that doesn't have a monetary return initially. It started to have a monetary return from the very start, that's exciting when you stumble across something like that that enables you to go all in, which is what you've done now, and have built a really credible business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that, you know, it won't always happen. You know, you have to, and I don't want anybody who's listening who maybe is still very early on in their entrepreneurial career to get disheartened, because it happens at everybody's own pace, and it depends on so many different factors. You know, I'm quite lucky. I don't have any children. I don't have a mortgage. I don't really have any responsibilities. Hence why I started so young. Whereas, you know, if you've got a family, you've got kids, you've got those kind of responsibilities, then you probably can't put as much time into it as I can, and therefore it will naturally take you a little bit longer. On the contrary, it could blow up. You just don't know. You know, you hear about these businesses all the time that, you know, they blow up out of nowhere. They have a very short-term success, and then the luck tends to run out, and then it's hard to sustain that growth over a prolonged period of time because they scale so quickly. So I'm a big believer of like slow and steady wins the race. I think taking each day as it comes, scaling to what you perceive to be a reasonable, amount, and focusing on the core principles of the company. You know, I would much rather spend more time with clients I currently have, even if an order's not in order, like in motion at the moment, instead of going out and searching for another 20 and trying to spread my time so thinly across all of it. So I would like to think that we're pretty kind of reluctant with who we work with, so we can focus on that core principle. And I think that everybody operates at their own speed, so that's an important thing to bear in mind.
Yeah, I think you can see that from the content you post on LinkedIn, and for anyone that's not connected with you on there, we'll pop a link in the show notes as well. And we spoke offline about some of the other sources that you actually used in terms of people like Gary Vee, and you and I are both of a very similar mind, where he's got an incredible mindset and a great message, but it's quite repetitive. But one of the things you spoke about was that initial busyness when setting up the business, and then the contrast to that. Do you want to maybe tell the listeners a bit about where you were going with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I was getting at was, when you first start a company, you know, you look at the bigger picture and there's a lot to do. So you are busy, you know, you're pulling together all the pieces of the puzzle that build a company. And that varies from whether you're running a brand, you're working on a B2C market or B2B, whatever it is, it's going to be very busy in at first. And then, you know, you build it, you've got the foundation set, and you go to launch. And it's kind of a weight set off your shoulders, you know, it's finally out there. But then it's quite weird, because in the matter of, like, say, a week, you've gone from being busy, stressed, you know, you're getting to launch, you've got to get XYZ done before a set date. It's done, it's launched, and then bam. And it is, I hate to break it to people, but it's going to be quiet. And quiet, you know, it's subjective. It depends on what you perceive to be quiet. But it's going to be quieter than what it was those weeks leading up to it. And Gary Vee as a message is a big advocate of, you have to work 18-hour days and ruthless and relentless. And I'm all for it. You know, you have to work. The message behind it is that you have to put the work in, you can't cheat it. And that's very true. But I also think that you need to be smart with how you work, and taking that, you know, Pareto principle, the 80-20 principle on board is so important, to focus on the high return tasks and not to spend your time on things that you perceive to be important, but just for the sake of knowing internally, I'm working, so that you don't feel guilty about not working. I think it's much better and a higher return if you were to, let's say, work a 6-7 hour day, then rest up, you know, enjoy your downtime, do whatever you need to do to take your mind off of things. Then the next day, those 6-7 hours are going to be so much more productive than it would be if you burn yourself out from day one. And you can't I don't care what you say, you cannot sustain 18-hour work days over a prolonged period of time. It's not possible. You know, you can be a freak of nature, but it's not possible. At one point, you will crash. You will have a week where you will not do anything. It's going to happen. So I think ensuring that that doesn't, being realistic with your time, what you can do, and just, as I said, baby steps. You know, it doesn't have to be day one you jump into an 18-hour day. Just, you know, those, as you said, those small habits, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, progressively build it up and get to the point where back in, okay, you know, 3 months ago I was only doing half an hour a day. Now 3.5 hours a day is compounding. And as you said, 3.5 hours a day over a prolonged period of time makes a lot, you know, you're going to get somewhere that way.
Yeah, I love that approach. And like you say, when you first launch in that business, you are running around like a blue-arsed fly trying to get it all laid out, and then you launch and then you wait for the orders to then potentially make you busy. And that's the challenge. And one of the big messages I know you put out there is not to get discouraged in those early stages. It's to make sure that anything that does come through the door, you treat it fantastically, you give it the best possible service, you make it a sticky piece of business. And that's hugely important. And making sure that you kind of keep working away in the background, even though you don't necessarily go from 0 to 100 as on the launch date is massively important. And I guess to try and give some relation to people that aren't business owners in fitness, you've spoken about, you don't get the results from 1 week of really hard graft. You get the results from time after time after time, because you turn up even on the days that you don't feel like it, or even in the days when it's not, you're not getting loads of orders in the business space. On the days when you don't really feel like training in the fitness space, you turn up. In business development, you probably, like, the number of contacts I have to make with a financial director for him to take a meeting with me and to let me review their insurances and put together a proposal is huge. So those kind of quiet periods where nobody's coming back to you, or nobody's placing orders with your business, or you're not seeing any muscle gain, patience. Don't get discouraged. Keep going, people.
Absolutely. And in any business, in anything in life, you're going to have peaks and troughs. You're going to have months or your days, your weeks where you're busy, and then on the contrary, the ones where you're quiet. And you know, there's always something you can do. You know, for example, since all of this coronavirus stuff has kind of kicked off, although we've actually been quite busy, I've spent a lot more of the time that I would have been spending in meetings, traveling to and from meetings and stuff, doing a lot of the back end side of things. So as I mentioned, you know, we're currently going for a rebrand. We're getting our new website built, so I can devote the time to having that contact with an agency and really giving them 100% of me, so that we can get the best finished result. So there is always something that can be done, don't get me wrong, but yeah, it's important not to get discouraged and to take it to heart as well, because in business, it's great that everything you put in, you get out, but it also means you're accountable for the good times and also the bad times as well, especially when you're a lone entrepreneur. There's no one to point the finger at. And I think that it's important to, everybody makes mistakes, everybody messes up. It's not a case of will you mess up, just a case of when. And I think that as long as you're accountable, as long as you fix the problem and you learn from it, most importantly, you know, that's what's important. You know, we've lost clients. It happens. Sometimes you can't do anything about it.
Of course, and in amongst that conversation there, you've dropped the C word, and I think for the listeners, there's going to be a lot of value in hearing what you've been up to during this period, and some of the things that you think will make changes for business as well. One of the things I love about the network that I've got on Instagram is the people that I follow and speak to on DMs. They're very like-minded, and we have like really high-level conversations rather than just, oh bro, what's your protein like at the moment? Which, don't get me wrong, I'm happy to answer that question as well, but I also really enjoy talking about business, the economy, where society is going, all these kind of things. And Ant's got a lot of views on that, and kind of anecdotal experience as well from what you've done with Whitetail Label during this period, Ant.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's a weird time for everybody. I was very concerned when things, you know, were getting quite serious here in the UK, about how it would affect the business. And it sounds selfish, and it probably was in the grand scheme of things. with what's going on. But my concern was, what can I do now to make sure that, one, I'm keeping busy, because this needs to keep me sane. I can't, if I don't work, if I don't run a business, I don't know what I would do. I really don't. And the same principle applies to training as well. If I don't have my training in my day, I don't know how I would operate. I can't concentrate. So my first thought was, how are we going to mitigate these problems? How am I going to go about it? So the first kind of week, that's when I got in contact with the agency, because I wanted to spend time on the business and make sure that, okay, if worst case scenario, we get no new orders, no new clients over this period of time, however long it ends up being, then at least I know when we're ready to go again, we can be revamped. We look great. We've got everything in place. But on the contrary, it was actually quite weird. We had a lot of business. I think we're potentially feeling like a lot of passion projects now, because a lot of people have been furloughed. They've got their time at home. So I have been very, very busy and having conversations with people and running orders. And we're still operating and processing as normal. So, slightly delayed lead times, slightly slower. So yeah, to be very honest, my day-to-day hasn't really changed an awful lot. And, you get these entrepreneurs that, isolation is what thrives to an extent. I love getting out. I love enjoying myself. I don't think it's fun unless you're having a good time. And I do miss that social aspect of seeing people, going to the gym and training, having conversations and being able to blow off some steam. But my actual day-to-day structure is pretty much remained the same, in all fairness. The only difference being is that, I can't go into a coffee shop and do my work, or I can't go into a shared office space. I'm just stuck indoors.
Yeah, and I think we've spoken before that a lot of your supply chain was relationships with China, so you knew how severe what was going on with COVID-19 was back in around Chinese New Year, wasn't it? And
yeah,
you kind of had a good idea of what was coming in terms of the grinding to a halt of a lot of manufacturing and a lot of the processes, and you prepared for that. But interestingly, you've now offered a service which is supporting people, like you say, with passion projects. Maybe they're on furlough and they've decided, I've always wanted to release this type of clothing, and you've got that kind of perfect service there for them to not just dip their toe in the water, but to actually put it out there for the first time, which is great. And one of the interesting points you've touched on there is that where you do your work and that environment that you've created for yourself. And how have you found purely working from home? Because I know you do like a coffee shop visit as well. And what's the setup in London called? Where you rent a small space?
Oh, the one is called Spaces
Spaces
that we're at. So it's just a shared office space. Yeah, it's like a hot desk sort of thing. Okay. It's exactly the same as we work. I mean, it's been tough. Don't get me wrong. It's hard to disassociate home from chilling and relaxing. And again, I hate to bring it up, but to talk about atomic habits, because it's a point that I heard yesterday on the audio book, is touching point on how environmental factors play a huge part in building habits and sustaining habits over a prolonged period of time. So it is difficult to be able to maximize my productivity whilst being at home, but I don't have another choice. I know that it has to be done. And in all fairness, provided I have things to do, i.e. emails are coming in, clients are contacting me, there's quotes to get done and information to send on, then I will get it done. I can't stand slow replies on emails. So if anybody, and I hope a client of mine is listening to this podcast, because I hope they can back me up here, I'm good on emails. Like, you'll probably never wait more than 2 hours to get a response from me on email. The only instance that you would be if you would send it at like 10 o'clock at night, or if you're based, in the States where time difference is quite big. But yeah, so there's always something for me to do. And I've just built systems, built structure in my day. I work from about 7 until about 12. I go for a walk at 12 o'clock for, an hour and a half, 2 hours. I go and I grab a coffee from the high street. I listen to my audiobook. I come back, do another hour, 2 hours of work. Then I have a workout, come back up, do a bit more work. And then I kind of have my downtime in the evening where I just chill out.
Yes. Like you say, that structure is where you'll work best in terms of committing to set blocks of working periods where you're available for your emails. You've got your walk built in, you've got your training built in, you've got your self-development built in, and importantly, that bit at the end, the kind of chill bit is hugely important as well, because I've been so guilty in the past of like doing my 9 to 5 training, which is my outlet, but then being like on in terms of like, because Instagram isn't necessarily a business for me, but it is a potential business in terms of there is some money to return to what I do on there. So kind of getting myself too stuck in like writing loads of captions at night and not focusing on actually getting away from thinking about being uber productive. And that part of the day is really important. I definitely like the structure that you've got in place there. And we've chatted previously about that kind of sort of vanity metric that some businesses have with respect to necessarily having office space or potentially having a set number of employees that makes them more credible or more reputable within their space. Whereas the agility that you've got to work from anywhere and have a really strong output is a huge advantage to the business that you've got, and but also to a lot of businesses might hopefully wake up during this COVID period that it is a very valuable option for them.
Yeah, 100%. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not taking all the credit in my company. Without the production teams in the factories, be it from China, Turkey, Portugal, wherever we do manufacture from, or the printers we work with, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. There are people in the process. There are people in the system that are fundamental to the operation. I'm not taking anything away from them. But in terms of actual employees, I'm the only official employee of White 2 Label Manufacturing, and I'm not afraid to admit that. And I think that quickly touching point on brands, particularly brands when they start out, is they want to seem big. They want to seem like they're this huge company. And I guess the same applies to corporate businesses when they go from, one office space to another in central London, and they want to perceive to be bigger than they really are because they think it's going to get them more clients. I think with brands, especially when you're starting out, is everybody loves an underdog. If you're authentic and true with your message, you'll find that people would much rather put the money in your pocket because they know it's going to better what you're doing instead of Gymshark's pocket or instead of Nike, Adidas, who really that sale doesn't really make an awful lot of a difference to them. And again, it's very relevant to COVID as well, because you see a lot of people now supporting the small businesses that are in a local high street that know that pays for their bills. I'd rather go to the privately owned coffee shop right now than go to Cafe Nero or Starbucks that's open and you've got using that, because I'd rather put money in his pocket and actually not help support him. He's still providing a service and a product for me. It's not charity work, but I would rather take my business there. So yeah, I think a lot of people tend to, they just try to do too much too quickly. And I think just remaining authentic, and I have no problem with saying I'm a one-man band. I tell people, when you're contacting me, I'm the only person that you're going to be speaking to, which is great because you don't have to repeat yourself. You don't have to go through the motions with 2-3 different people. But at the same time, you also, on the contrary, have to understand that, I am trying to make sure that I'm providing a great service for everybody. So what that means is that I might not be able to reply to you in 5 minutes. It might take a little while for me to get back to you. It's never going to take more than, as I said, 5 hours or so by, 2 hours by email, but maybe a little longer over, other platforms. But generally speaking, it's great to embrace that. People respect it.
I think you're absolutely right. And as long as the service that they receive is the same they would get from somebody that's perceived to be bigger or kind of more corporate, then there's no difference. They're happy to pay their money the same way that as long as the coffee you get from that independent retailer is the same as the one you get from Cafe Nero, then you're a happy boy. And that's the output of it. One of the kind of final questions I wanted to ask you, Ant, was with regards to goals long term. You've pivoted from that B2C sportswear brand to a B2B White 2 Label. And where do you go from here, and what does it look like as Ant Mellor, the entrepreneur?
I think I'm going to keep cracking on with White 2 Label and put a lot more into that. There's big plans to continue to expand outwards with the company. There's talks, or I have plans to kind of open up a little like North American hub to start appealing to kind of North America and Canada and those sorts of markets, because there's a huge demand out there. And similarly to what we have here, there's nobody really doing it well. There's nobody really doing it it can always be done better. We'll put it that way. So I think that's a kind of a big step that we will take at some point. As you know, I sold Absolute. So I'm still in the company. There's a form of restructure with that. So I'm still involved in the product side of things for the first year. So you'll see some good quality stuff coming out of that brand as well. And it'll be exciting to work on projects for something that's been inspired by myself again. You know, for the last 2 years, we've been working on projects for other people, which is great and it's fun, but it's nice to actually put pen to paper and it be your own design and creation. So there's a lot in the pipeline, but yeah, particularly with White 2 label, there's big steps. I think most importantly, the biggest step we're going to take is that step into North America. That will be the thing that will take us to a big company.
That's very, very exciting, and ultimately you kind of feel like you've proved yourself in many ways within the UK, and that you can continue to scale that, of course, because there's still thousands more customers that you can reach and work with in the business space. But then you can take that same model, maybe adjust it very slightly depending on what the cultural and the business dealings are. In America, they might differ very slightly, and get the same results, hopefully, but with an even bigger market and a bigger demographic, which just ultimately means more turnover and more profit for the business, which is what talks at the end of the day, which a lot of people don't realize, that cash is king, especially during this period. People are starting to realize that quite quickly.
Absolutely.
That's super exciting, and I've really enjoyed chatting to you today, and I think there's going to be a lot from the listeners can take from this, as with all the episodes. I've absolutely loved the conversation from a selfish perspective, but hopefully people get a lot from it as well. Where's the best place that they can connect with you? I know I've shouted out your LinkedIn. I'll put that in the show notes, but where else?
Yeah, so feel free, if anybody is interested, connect me on LinkedIn. That will be the best professional platform anyway. But alternatively, if you want to check out the business page on Instagram, it's at White 2 label. The website, if you just Google White 2 label manufacturing, you'll find it. So all of those places are great. And if anybody does have any plans to launch a fashion brand, would like some advice, information, or on the contrary would like any assistance with manufacturing, then please feel free to get in touch, and more than happy to help out.
Great stuff, Ant. Thanks very much for joining us again today, guys. If you have enjoyed this, fire up a screenshot in your Instagram story, tag Ant, tag myself, fire me a message. The feedback so far has been amazing, and it's massively appreciated. I will speak to you all again very, very soon.
Happy days.